We rarely question the maps we see every day, from the pull-down charts in a middle school classroom to the blue dot guiding us on our phones. We tend to treat these representations as unquestionable, objective facts. Every map suffers a mathematical problem. Flattening a sphere without tearing it is impossible. Try peeling an orange and pressing it flat. Because of this reality, cartographers force compromises. To make a readable rectangle, mapmakers artificially stretch the landmasses to fill the empty gaps. Every map acts as a subjective proposal, forcing a choice between which geographic details to preserve and which to discard. Since mathematical accuracy is impossible, the mapmaker must choose exactly where to place those distortions. These choices, whether made for navigation, aesthetics, or national pride, embed specific priorities into the very foundation of the image. The first layer of cartographic manipulation is projection, the mathematical formula used to flatten the globe. The most famous of these is the Mercator projection, created in the 16th century. This is the world on Mercator's projection. It was designed for maritime navigation because it preserved straight lines for sailing, but it does so by inflating the physical size of the northern hemisphere. Greenland looks roughly the same size as Africa, when in reality, Africa is about 14 times larger. This creates a power bias, making northern nations appear geographically dominant. Alternative models, like the Gall-Peters projection, show what happens when you prioritize landmass size. This version corrects the scale distortion, revealing the true relative proportions of the continents, even if it requires elongating the shapes of nations near the equator to make the math work. Then there's the concept of centering. A mapmaker has to choose which specific region occupies the exact middle of the page, forcing the rest of the world to the margins. For centuries, standard maps placed Europe at the absolute center, establishing a Eurocentric worldview. By contrast, a Pacific-centric map shifts the entire focal point to Asian and Pacific nations, moving the Americas and Europe to the extreme outer edges. The physical size and central placement of a country on the page subliminally dictates its perceived global importance, asserting cultural dominance before you even read a single label. The second layer of bias lies in the drawing of borders. The lines separating countries are active political statements and claims of sovereignty. In international diplomacy, a massive gap exists between a solid line and a dashed line. A cartographer must choose whether to represent a boundary as undisputed or contested and unresolved. Rendering a specific territory as sovereign with a solid line supports that nation's legitimacy on the world stage, while drawing it as disputed can undermine its authority. Historically, these lines were fixed in ink. Today, major tech platforms use a practice called digital geofencing to navigate these diplomatic disputes. Depending on where you are physically standing, the borders on your smartphone will actively change. Digital maps shift their boundary lines based on the user's GPS location to comply with the local laws of whoever claims that territory. Modern borders have evolved into fluid algorithms, recalibrating in real time to appease local laws and mask diplomatic friction. The final layer of manipulation involves the context added to the map, specifically the naming and the colors. This is toponymy, the politics of naming. This creates a tension between exonyms, names given to a place by foreign powers, and endonyms, the original indigenous names used by the people who live there. This map illustrates how colonial naming acts as a tool of erasure. By labeling the Australian landmass with the exonym Nueva Holanda, or New Holland, and illustrating it with classical European figures, the cartographers visually wiped away the indigenous presence. This helped legally justify the concept of terra nullius, or nobody's land. Beyond the text, mapmakers also use color to create a visual rhetoric of threat. By assigning aggressive or high-contrast colors to rival states, a map can subliminally paint those nations as hostile to the viewer. These labels and ink choices actively dictate who owns the history of the land and which nations represent a visual threat. A map is a powerful convergence of flawed mathematics, political bordering, and ideological ink. These cartographic choices have real-world stakes. They justify historical territorial claims and dictate the terms of international relations. To navigate this, we must develop critical geographic literacy. We have to learn how to read the intent behind the image. The next time you look at a map, look past its perceived accuracy. Ask yourself directly, whose worldview is this trying to sell me?